What is going on, everybody? This is a 2018 Mercury 6 horsepower 4-stroke outboard, and it has been an awesome motor for my setup. I have not had any major problems out of it. I have went through hundreds of your guys' comments. I've talked to countless people about this motor because I like it so much, but there are some things people have frustrations with, and I wanted to cover those today. I wanted to pick out the top 5 issues that people have talked to me about and frustrations they've had with this motor. So let's do it. My understanding is it's actually manufactured by Tohatsu and they rebrand it. So basically this is the same motor as the Tohatsu outboards. This is manufactured in Japan. Also the 4, 5, and 6 horsepower versions of this are basically the same motor, except for the carburetor. They have different size carburetors and maybe a different pitch prop. All right, issue number 1. This is easily the most common issue that I've seen through online reviews about this guy and talking to you guys, and that is cold starting. This guy is hard to cold start, especially if you use the internal tank. From conversations that I've had with a lot of experts and old timers, the issue is in regards to the system losing prime in between trips. If you look at where the inlet of the carburetor is, inlet of the carburetor is right here relative to the fuel tank. It's about this high. So that means gas has got to go through all of these lines up to the carb. If your gas level is below this level, you can get backflowing and lose prime in the system in between trips. There are check valves in the fuel pump, but my understanding is those valves need operating pressure, need the diaphragm to be moving back and forth to create a watertight seal. So when the motor is not operating, you can get fuel flowing through the fuel pump, through those check valves, back into your tank. And what happens is the first maybe 6 or 7 pulls, the fuel pump is having to reprime everything to get fuel back up and into all these lines. I've tested it. I've taken this fuel line off here before a trip after the motor has sat for a few days, and it took 6 pulls to get gas to come back out of this line. A couple of things you can do to help prevent this: keep your gas tank full in between trips, kill your gas valve immediately when you get done. Number 1 way that I can make sure that this guy starts within 2 pulls every trip is before I go, I have an external tank. I'll hook the external tank up and give it a couple of squeezes. That's going to put gas in all of these lines. Number 2, I've had multiple people ask me about this. I had the same problem with mine, and this has to do with the pull start locking mechanism. So when you're in forward, you don't want to start your motor, because if you start the motor and you're in forward or reverse, there's a risk of you running into something, or a risk of the motor moving forward, jumping forward when the motor starts, and you getting knocked out of the boat. So what this mechanism does here is when you're in forward, it locks the pull start, so you can't start the motor when you're in gear. That is in neutral. It lifts that locking mechanism. When you're in forward, it drops the locking mechanism that locks your pull start. You can't pull it in this position. What some people have a problem with, when they're really aggressive with the pull start, sometimes this will slip out a place. That lever will drop down slightly and it will lock the pull start in the middle of a pull. Easy solution for this: be gentle when you're pulling it. You don't want to just jerk it as hard as you can. You want at least an initial gentle pull until it starts moving. Gentle pull to about here, then pull out more aggressively. Number 3 has to do with vibration and noise. The 4, 5, and 6 models of this guy, single cylinder, you can see single spark plug. And the issue with the single cylinder is that when that piston moves up and down, the motor's absorbing all of that movement. But if you go up to an 8 horsepower, it has 2 cylinders, and they're basically offset each other. So when one's going up, the other one's going down. They help absorb each other's force and vibration, and it is a much quieter and smoother operation. I don't mind the vibration. I don't find it as being a major issue. It's not that loud of a motor, so it's not a major issue, but a lot of people ask, hey, mine's vibrating a lot. A lot of times it's just the fact that it's a single cylinder motor. All single cylinder motors are gonna have more vibration and more noise than motors that have multiple cylinders. Issue number 4. Some people have said to me that they think the pull start is really hard to pull. I haven't had a major issue with this, but I can see where they're coming from. Before this motor had 100 hours on it, I did notice that it was a little bit more difficult to pull than some of the older 2-strokes that I've had, but not really, you can't really compare 2-stroke to a 4-stroke. It's not a deal breaker for me, but if you do have a shoulder issue, or if you generally have a hard time starting, like weed eaters, lawnmowers, or chainsaws, you may want to see if you can test one of these out. Maybe they'll let you dry pull some, maybe they'll have a used one somewhere that you can pull to make sure it's not gonna hurt your shoulder. But if you do have those issues, you may want to look at stepping up and getting an electric start. From what I've read, this does have decompression, which helps the pull starting, especially with the single cylinder. If you were to compare the pull start force for Mercury versus Yamaha versus Suzuki, I would bet that they're all very, very, very close. It would be a very good video if somebody out there would do a comparison of pull start force required for Yamaha, Suzuki, and Mercury. And the 5th complaint has to do with the carb on this guy. If you read through all of the reviews online and the boat forums, one common issue that people have with this motor is contamination in the carb, which causes starting issues and which causes idling issues. That's not a fault of this motor or design. I think any 4-stroke, small 4-stroke could potentially have the same problem. From what I've read and researched, all the new motors have to have really strict emissions regulations dictated by, I guess, the EPA. Also, from what I've read, the main contributor for emissions for outboards like this is exhausting unburnt fuel. What controls that is the carburetor, and from what I've read is because of the tight emissions regulations that the carburetor tolerances, the jets have to get tighter and tighter to make sure that all the fuel is sent to the motor is burnt, which means if there's contamination in the carburetor, it's gonna have a lot bigger impact than, let's say, a 1984 Yamaha 2-stroke had, right? You can easily avoid carb issues by doing 2 simple things. Number 1, always get gas with non-ethanol if you can get it. Ethanol attracts water, it breaks down faster than non-ethanol gas, and that will cause issues in your carb. Number 2, use a fuel stabilizer. This guy can get between 20 and 30 miles per gallon. That means if you have a big 7-gallon external tank, that gas is gonna sit a long time. So fuel stabilizer will keep that gas fresh. I absolutely love this motor. It has been a workhorse for me. It has not had any issues. I've talked to a bunch of people. There's not one specific component in this guy that people feel is designed incorrectly or people feel has a really short life that breaks down super fast. It's a super simple motor. Everything's extremely reliable. If you can deal with those 5 things, this guy is absolutely amazing, and I just feel it's going to be reliable for many, many years to come. Appreciate the view. Thank you as always. Later.